I'm attorney Phil Jusino, and this is Finding Common Ground here on Altice. You can catch the show every Saturday at 10 a.m. on channel 115. And if you missed the show, you can go to my YouTube channel. Actually, I have three. Phil Jusino, Jusino Law, and also WLINY. You go there, you look for Finding Common Ground. We're going to have it listed by date. So if you miss a particular Saturday and you want to see the show, go to YouTube, subscribe, and you can find like a playlist. You can find the different shows. And they have some older shows, some newer shows. We've done about 40 shows in all. So you can see the earlier ones. I don't think I had much hair back then, but the earlier shows and the later shows. So got a great show planned. We're going to talk about the meaning of a democracy, the meaning of a republic, what America is. We're going to talk about capitalism versus socialism, the elements, a very, very important discussion. I even throw in communism. You're going to see the similarities between communism and socialism. Very, very different from capitalism, which is what made this country great. Let's get to it. Often when you hear a politician speak, and very high-placed politicians, it could be some presidents, or it could be a senator, or a member of the House of Representatives, or the media. They often say, this great democracy, or we live in a democracy, or America is a democracy. No, it ain't. America is not a democracy. We have democratic institutions, certain types of votes, like we may have something on a referendum, and majority will rule. Pass a school budget or something along the lines, whether a park is built or whether we put up a cell tower, sometimes it's majority rule. But America is what they call a constitutional republic. It will be called a constitutional federal republic, where we have members in the federal level, members of Congress, we have a House, we have a Senate, and we have a president. We don't have a monarchy, we don't have a king, and we have it at the state level. The state level has the Assembly, New York for instance, the Assembly, the Senate, and a governor. And locally, we have Suffolk County Legislature, let's say, and we have a Suffolk County Executive. So a democracy is a system of government by which the population or the eligible members of society rule, majority rule. Now, when I say eligible members, it could be voting age. So it might be in a true democracy, which it really doesn't exist, but in a true democracy, let's say people 18 and over get to vote. They are the eligible members that decide every facet of the government. Not a very practical way to do things overall. In a republic, it's a state in which the supreme power is given to the people, their elected officials, and a president. We have President Trump. He's the executive branch, the legislative branch at the federal level, House of Representatives and Senate. We have the judiciary, which judges. At the federal level, we have the Supreme Court of the United States, 9 justices. That's the branch, the 3 branches of government, which unfortunately many people don't know about. I've seen them do, a man on the street, well, they go to a college campus or a beach, and somebody with a microphone will say, what are the 3 branches of government? And many people, it's amazing to me, have a problem, executive, legislative, judiciary. They forget one. They're like, well, the presidency, and they'll say something way off base. But those are the 3 branches of government, and in America, we have a republic. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about, or a lot about, capitalism and socialism. Well, before we do that, I just wanted to go back to a republic. Now, how does a law get passed? If you're my age, you've watched Schoolhouse Rock growing up. For the millennials, you don't know what the heck I'm talking about unless you saw something on YouTube, where they say it has a little bill, he's made of paper and he's running around and he says how he becomes the law or a law. With a republic, unlike a democracy where they vote and they'll say, okay, are we going to have a law that says X, Y, Z? Let's put it to a vote, and people vote. In a republic, which is what we have, if a law is going to be passed, it starts out as a bill. It has to pass the House by a majority. The House has 435 members, so 50% plus 1, that would be a majority. Right? Now, if some people don't vote, it could change it because normally it'd be 218 would be enough for the House to pass a bill. But let's say 3 members of Congress don't vote, or there's a vacancy. It could change. For the Senate, there's 100 senators, so you need 51. Now, the vice president can break a tie, but 51 would be enough to get that law to the president, put it on his desk. If he signs it, it becomes a law. If he vetoes it, it goes back, and it has to be by 2/3 now, not just a majority, to override a presidential veto. So that's what would happen. So that's how a republic operates. So if I want something, I could say, I'd like that law passed. It has to go through Congress. It has to go through the legislative body of your particular state, or if it's local, of your county or city. Very, very important distinction. Now, let's move along to what capitalism is, what socialism is, and also I threw in there communism, which is not far behind. It's like steroids, it's like socialism on steroids, or socialism is communism light. Very different from capitalism. Let's start with capitalism. That's an economic system in which countries trade and industry, and also production, controlled by private owners for profit. Private owners. Now, there are governments that have agencies, but I'm talking about what capitalism truly is. So think about it. Apple and Microsoft, and you name it. It could be a mom and pop, or an accountant that works out of his house. That's a form of capitalism because he's doing something for profit. He doesn't necessarily need the government to oversee what he's doing. Now, of course, if you're an accountant, you have to have a license. If you're a lawyer, you have to pass the bar and become a lawyer. So the government is involved to some extent, but they're not telling you how to set your prices, how many hours you can work. So it's for profit by the owners. And if you have a great idea, look at Amazon. That guy's like the richest guy in the world, or certainly one of them. He had an idea and he went with it. Or Gates with Microsoft. Or you have Apple. Or you have, just think about any, McDonald's. I was watching a documentary the other day how Ray Kroc wrestled McDonald's away from the McDonald brothers, but there was a contract and then he took it globally. All right? The McDonald's brothers, it was still kind of small potatoes, no pun intended, but it was kind of small potatoes. Colonel Sanders, a corporation took it to the next level, kind of screwed him in the process, but big ideas can generate huge profits. And that's why people do these things. They take risks. I talked about Levi Strauss a couple of shows ago. What he did when he came, I believe it was from Austria, and he took a big gamble going to San Francisco from New York. He could have been killed on the way. He could have lost his inventory. But he took a gamble and it paid off for him. It doesn't always pay off. Like someone says, I want to be a movie star. You go to Hollywood. More certain places, you want to be a Broadway star. You go to Broadway. You might make it, you might not. That's the risk you take. As opposed to, let's say, if you're born in China or Russia where you're a good athlete and then they take you, they send you to a special camp or a special school to be a basketball player or a wrestler, whatever. They see something in you. Right? Then you're controlled by the state. Like in the miracle hockey story, 1980, when the USA won the gold medal and they beat Russia on the way to the gold medal. That wasn't the gold medal game. A lot of people forget that. But those athletes were controlled by the state. They couldn't just say, I'm really good. I want to play for this team. I want to play like in America. If you're really good, you get drafted. You can play professionally. And the better players make more money. I'm sure those athletes, maybe they live better, the Russian athletes, lived better than the average Russian at the time. But they weren't making $1 million. So let's talk about the characteristics of capitalism. Very, very important. There are 5. Economic freedom. Now, that's to pursue opportunities. When you'll see in socialism and communism, it's not the same. So economic freedom. If tomorrow I want to start a company, I can do that. I may succeed, I may fail. I'm allowed to do that. Economic freedom. I don't have to call the government and say, you know what, I want to open a deli tomorrow. Can I? No, I just open a deli. Again, certain rules and regulations, but I can do it. Like I wanted to become an attorney. I didn't call the government and say, hey, can I become an attorney? Or I want to be a doctor. I want to be a plumber. Economic freedom. Voluntary exchange. To buy what you want to buy or not buy, like when they were forcing healthcare down your throats, Obama administration. If I don't want to buy something, I don't have to buy it. Now, there are exceptions. You want to drive a car in New York or anywhere, you have to have insurance, unless you're very rich and you can opt out, but you need insurance. But you know what? You don't have to buy automobile insurance. Don't drive. You live in the city. No one says you have to buy automobile insurance. Well, if I drive, I do. But you know what? I don't need it. I'm going to take an Uber, or I'll take the train, or whatever. I'll walk. You don't have to buy that. If I want to buy a diamond ring tomorrow, I can do that. If I want to buy a particular car, I can do that. Voluntary exchange. No one tells me what I have to buy or what I can't buy. I'm only limited by my access to the funds to buy whatever I want to buy. Private property rights. It's the cornerstone of capitalism. In a socialistic society or in a communistic society, you don't always have that ability to, let's say, buy a house or own a house, especially in communism. The state owns the property and the means of production. Here, I can buy a house if I can afford it, or I can buy an apartment, or I can buy a condo or a co-op. If I want to start a business, I can own my business and I can sell that business or my practice. Think about that. In other types of situations, communism, socialism, you don't have that luxury. So if Amazon, the guy who owns Amazon, wanted to sell Amazon, he could do that. He'd find a buyer, he could sell it and say, I made my money. A lot of people buy businesses or they start businesses and then they sell them. Gates could sell his. And many of these are publicly traded, so it's a little bit different. But if I want to sell if I want to retire and sell my practice, I could do that. Another attorney comes in, we work out a deal, sign a contract, I get a certain amount of money. I own my practice. You can own rights to a book, rights to music. You have rights. That's the beauty of capitalism. The profit motive, again, another bedrock of capitalism. The profit motive. Incentive to be creative. If someone said to me, Phil, you could be a security guard, and I did that in college and a little bit of high school, but mainly college and law school. I worked security. I even worked it when I was an assistant DA. Believe it or not, I was an assistant DA, having graduated from Fordham Law School. I needed to make extra money to support my family. I didn't call the government and say, I need reparations, or I need government cheese, or I need this, or I need that. No, I went out, I got a second job. I had to get permission from the district attorney's office. I had to work in Nassau because I was a Suffolk ADA, and there's certain rules, and I got the job. And I got my old job back. So I was an assistant DA, and on weekends, for 7 days a week, I worked for almost a whole year. And not complaining, that's what I did to support my family until I made more money and I was able to just keep my one job. But that was my choice. I was allowed to do that. But if someone said to me, you could be a security guard and make $50,000, let's say in a socialist or communism, you'll make $50,000 being a security guard. Or you can make a lot of sacrifices, go to college, go to law school, become a lawyer, graduate from a fine law school, and you're going to make $50,000. Maybe I wouldn't go to law school. Maybe I'm going to say I'm going to do all of that work, make sacrifices, be away from my family. I lived in the city. I lived in the Bronx for the years I was at Fordham. Then I went to Fordham Law School, and I lived in Manhattan. I lived in a crappy apartment initially. It was okay, but actually it was the West Side YMCA was the first place I lived. That wasn't too good. A communal bathroom. I lived in the size of a closet, but it was cheap, $75 a week. And then eventually I got an apartment in Queens. I would have left to live in Manhattan, but that's what I could afford at the time. And Fordham didn't have dorms yet. So that was my setup. If someone said, you're not going to make any more money doing all those things, I might say, I might as well be a security guard and make my $50,000 and not have to work a 60-hour week, not bring work home. Security guard, at the end of the shift, you're gone, you go. Unless you get stuck with another shift. But you don't have to bring work home. There were certain jobs where The end of the day, your shift is over, you're done. I bring work home. I got work to do tonight. On weekends, I come in. This is my thing. Like, the expression, time to make the donuts in that commercial for Dunkin' Donuts. He made the donuts because that was a profit motive. If he didn't make the donuts, he wouldn't make any money. Or Dunkin' Donuts would go out of business. Or who's going to make the hamburgers? And there's a profit motive. Very, very important. And it has to do with the incentive to be creative. I gave the example before about Levi Strauss. Why did he do all those things? The Panama Canal, a boat, I think a train, all the way to San Francisco, to California, then take a boat up north. He could have been killed along the way, robbed, bad things. He could have got malaria. I think there was talk, people got malaria on that trip with the Panama Canal. It wasn't like you just hopping on a plane and flying to California, you're there in 6 hours. If he was told you're not going to make any more money than by doing that than just sitting home, why don't you just sit home and not take that risk? That's a real risk. Going to law school could be a gamble. You maybe don't get through it. Maybe you don't make as much money as you want to make. You have student loans. But what he did was a real risk. He risked his life. The next thing, which I think is probably one of the most important things, competition. That keeps, not only does it keep the prices down, right, but it creates more of a diversity with items, goods and services, right? Because you remember years ago, if you're my age, you hear stories of, let's say, American going to Russia, if they could get in there, and they bring blue jeans. I heard one story, a guy bought like 10 pairs of blue jeans, and he made money for the Russians that had the money to buy them, but there was no opportunity for those jeans, to get those jeans, because they weren't making them. It was the Soviet Union. It wasn't even Russia, it was the Soviet Union. Communist. They tell you what you can wear. It's almost like the old Wendy's commercial. Is next swimwear, and the person comes out and they're wearing the same thing and they're holding a beach ball, or they'll say evening wear, and they come out and they got whatever. No choices. Competition creates those opportunities and keeps the prices down for the consumer. Think about it. If Levi Strauss was the only company in America that made blue jeans, they could charge what they want. But then you have Lee's, and then you have Macy's brand, you have Walmart has a brand, you have all kinds of, Ulala Sassoon, remember that? They made jeans, they came out and they raised the price, but it was cool, so people paid for it. But you have competition. So if I want jeans, I got an amazing amount of choices. If I want to get I don't drink alcohol, but if you want to buy beer, go to the 7-Eleven. How many choices do you have? Miller Lite, Miller, Corona beer. You have, imported beers. You have all these choices. Why? Partly because of competition. Right? If the state said, this is the beer we make, and this is the beer you're going to drink. Pretty boring. Might not be a beer you like. So it keeps the prices down. If there was only one deli in town, his prices could go up. But like, you remember Little House on the Prairie? And the people became rich. They had this, for lack of a better term, it was like a general store. And they could charge whatever they want to charge because you had no choice. Here, if I don't want to go to Macy's, I can go to Walmart. Or I can go to Sears or whatever, if they're still open. I can go to other places. That's competition, keeps the price down. Because if one place raises, like gas, if you really shop for gasoline, if one gas station had $2.50 a gallon and one had $2 a gallon, that $2.50 place would probably go out of business pretty soon. Why would you go there? You'd go to the cheaper one. All things being equal, quality gas and a service or whatever the case might be. But very, very important, competition. Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty on this planet than any other economic or political system. That's a fact. I'll give you an example. The American Enterprise Institute said 700 million, that's more than twice the population of America, have moved out of deep poverty, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. In the 21st century alone, the last 20 years, Thanks to capitalism, not because of socialism. Go to Venezuela or Cuba or someplace, Russia with communism. Poverty means less than $2 a day. Imagine working, making $2 a day. Now, maybe if you live in Mexico, you could buy a few things. But in America or any other place for the most part, Europe, you'd be destitute. So that many people in the 21st century, not the 20th, 21st century alone, more than double the population of America. This is worldwide because of capitalism. Think about it. The infant mortality rate, more babies survive childbirth because of better hospitals, better doctors, better medicines, machines, sonogram. Let's say you're high risk. If you didn't have sonogram, maybe you don't know what the condition of the baby is. But capitalism has been the main factor. You look at other great societies. Look, even Rome, Greece, there was a level of, and those were not the true capital. They had either a monarch, or they had a king, or they had a political or a military leader in charge. But if people could exchange goods and services and there was a profit motive, it did better than if it wasn't. Right? And at the end, I'm going to tell a little story about 6 guys on an island to illustrate capitalism. And on Thanksgiving, I usually do a bit on the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims didn't survive and thrive because of socialism or anything else. It was capitalism. Now, the Indians saved them and they came together and they pooled their assets. There's some truth to that. But they decided, the leaders of that community decided that it wasn't enough just to say, okay, we're all going to work, kumbaya, and everything will be great. They were lazy pilgrims that didn't want to work and lay around. So if you're working your butt off and the guy next to you is doing nothing, when it comes time to eat, you got to give him half the food or a portion of the community food? That's not fair. You'd say, wait a minute, why am I busting my butt? I'm going to lay down. And then they all lay down and everything collapses. So the Pilgrims survived because they decided to give tracts of land, say, all right, that's your acre or whatever it is. That's your acre. That's your acre. Work it. If you don't work it, you're going to starve. It's like a squirrel that wants to lay around and not collect nuts for the winter. What happens? They die. Unless some other squirrel says, here, have some of mine. But that's not the fair way to do it. Now, if there's a handicapped person or something, the government should step in. That's fine, a safety net. But that's what saved the Pilgrims, because then people say, well, if I lay around, that's my acre, and I lay around, I can't go to Jim next door and say, where's mine? Like you could, let's say, with socialism and communism. So now, what is socialism? It's an economic and political system, both economic and political, which advocates the regulation of trade, industry, the production, the means of production, by the community or the state. And they say state, they mean the government. Right? Not with the people, or not with the individuals, let's say. Now, sometimes that sounds like, oh, we're going to work together, almost like kindergarten. Let's all work together, class. And all right, that's fine in some respects. But think about it, even years ago when there were hunters and gatherers. If you sat around and did nothing and didn't hunt or didn't contribute in some way, you would starve. Now, with the system we have now, where we have stores and things like that, you don't have to go out and hunt if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to. You go to the store. What do you exchange? Money. Credit card, but it's still money. How do you get the money? You work for it. You don't have a money tree. Years ago, in some places, you watch these reality shows, they maybe don't have to have money. They live in the woods, they go hunting, that's fine. But they're still doing something. They're not relying on the charity of others. So what are the socialist philosophies? Well, first of all, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin. Those were the philosophers, and it sounds kind of corny, philosophers. You don't say, well, he's a philosopher of capitalism. No, he's a doer or mover. But they had these philosophers. Whenever you hear philosophers, you know that it's not really hard work. Let's be honest. All right? A philosophy teacher, is he really rolling up his sleeves and doing? He's teaching. And teaching is important, but I'd rather sit in a business class than a philosophy class. And I've taken philosophy in college. But what are the features? A stark contrast to capitalism. This is what they are. Collective ownership. Economic, social, and political equality. Now, when you hear the word equality, be careful. Economic planning, the government. Right? Whenever they talk about things like that, who's really in charge? The government. It's not the individuals. No competition. That's got to be the worst idea for socialism. No competition. We just talked about what competition can bring. Imagine the major leagues that pick people randomly. They go to, okay, you're going to play center field for the Yankees. Who would go to those games? Maybe for humor, for comedy, you'd say, oh God, I know that guy Joey. He's the worst guy, athlete ever. Oh, he's going to play center field for the Yankees? I want to see this. No, competition. That's why a major leaguer can command more than a minor leaguer. He's better. There are rare exceptions where maybe the minor league is better, he never got a shot. But for the most part, the major leaguer who plays in the major leagues is better than, let's say, a AAA ball player. The AAA ball player is better than the AA, and so on. The Ducks, it's an independent affiliate. It's not affiliated, rather, with the Mets or the Yankees. They don't get paid that much money, maybe $30,000 if they're lucky. A major leaguer can command a couple of $1 million. A utility infielder can probably make $1 million or more. Why? Because he's unique. When I played ball, my dream was to be a Major League Baseball player, there were 660 major leaguers. I could have probably got struck by lightning twice before making it to the show. Very, very difficult. Right? I played ball, a travel team, and my coach was Doug LaTrenta, who played AAA for the Yankees. He got that to that level. And he told me, he says, Phil, it is extremely, extremely difficult to make it to the major leagues. Even if I stayed and played my last 2 years, let's say, and got drafted, to knock around the minor leagues, to make it, because it wasn't like every year another 660 major leaguers are selected. No, maybe each team a couple. So to make it and put everything else, and it's a risk. Because let's just say I got drafted, didn't go to law school, and then I didn't make it. Then what do I do if I didn't have a degree? Then what do I do? I have to select something that doesn't require education or training because I got none. My training wasn't baseball, let's say. But I was smart enough to say, realistically, very, very difficult to make it to the majors. Become an attorney? Yeah, I can do that. I'll be good at that. That's what I chose to do. So no competition, bad idea. Positive role of the government. Again, whenever you say a positive role for the government, there's a need for the government. The military, they build roads. I think the expression was, what are the 10 scariest words? I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you, something like that. All right? I'd rather keep my distance from the government. All right? Let them do what they have to do. They have to provide a defense. They have to keep us safe. They have government agencies that are important, some more than others. They build the roads, local, federal, state, and so on. And that's important. You need the government. But when you rely too heavy on the government, big bloated government is the worst thing for an economy. There's no profit. Well, think about an agency. You might have heard about when some of these agencies, let's say they get $1 million. I'll give you an example. Let's say an agency's budget is $1 million. They get $1 million every year. There's no incentive to save money. Because let's say the next year, that whole year, they can, you know what? I only needed $850,000. What do you think is going to happen the next year? They're going to be allotted $850,000 because they did it. You came in under budget. Great. So they don't do that because it's the government. You want to get $1 million so you can pay people and take that get that meeting or convention to go to Vegas or do this. I think one of the agencies, a guy got in trouble because they were going on these lavish junkets, either playing golf. One guy went to Vegas and he had a picture of him in the bathtub with candles and he spent a ton of money. There's no profit motive. Right? There's no incentive to save money. Whereas if, let's say, you had a crew and you said to them, This is the budget. But if you can bring it under budget, you get paid more. You'd be surprised how often they come under the budget. I remember an example with Donald Trump with Woolman Rink. That made him even more famous than he was at the time. Woolman Rink was a disaster. The city could not build this skating rink in Central Park. The copper wiring was getting stolen. They had rules and regulations where you couldn't lay enough concrete in a certain day, so they were always falling behind. And then they put Donald Trump in charge, and he found out that the ice maker for the Montreal Canadiens had a better system, rubber tubing and brine, as opposed to copper wire. No one's going to steal rubber tubing and brine, and they didn't. And then he could pour, let's say, 4 inches of concrete, or whatever the case may be, as opposed to 3. And he could line the trucks up to Jersey, because in New York there were rules, you had to do certain things and regulations. It tied his hands if he worked for the government. He was private, he got it done. It's a great Woolman Rink. I've seen it. I haven't skated on it, but I've seen it. My daughter, who used to play ice hockey, lives in the city, she skated on it. It's a great thing for New York City and Central Park. And that was done privately. And I've heard other stories where there's an incentive. So if you have a company and I say, we got to get this bridge done in a certain period of time, if you get it done quicker and maybe cheaper, you get some of that money we saved. They're going to do a faster job than standing around working for the government. Okay? Work and wages, and this is the one that gets to me. Work and wages according to ability and needs. What kind of horse you know what is that? Work and wage according to ability. According to who? The government. Like me. I am an attorney. I have a law firm. I have people work for me. I set my prices. There's competitions. I can't charge $1,000 an hour if my contemporaries are charging, let's say, $450 or $500 or something like that. Otherwise, nobody would use me. Oh, just say $1,000. I can go to another attorney, get a similar product, maybe not as good, similar product, and I'm going to pay $400. Okay. So there's competition. But I get paid what I'm worth based on what? Based on the people that hire me. If nobody hired me, I'd have to find another line of work. So work and wages according to ability and needs. Now, ability, say, all right, this guy's better than that guy, he should make more money, right? But needs, ability, wait a minute. Now, if I came from a rich family and I say, I got to live according to those standards, so my needs are greater than that guy who came from a poor family. So I got to get paid more. I'm going to do the same work, but pay me more because my needs are higher. Or I have 5 kids. He's got no kids. Pay me more. For the same work, shouldn't work that way. You want to have 5 kids, you better take care of your 5 kids. And that doesn't mean you should make more than the guy that chose not to have any kids, but he's working his butt off. So, and if you look at it, like who makes these decisions? The government. Bernie Sanders wants to be president. He'll be making a lot of those decisions in connection with Congress, but he's at the top. He's the president, the executive branch. So he would say, okay, this person should make this person should make that, or his philosophy would flow down to the different agencies like that. Now, communism. Not that far off than socialism. Now, communism is a political system arrived at by Karl Marx, and all aspects of trade, industry, the means of production is regulated by the state or the government, not private individuals. Okay? And it sound familiar? Wages is paid according to ability and need. I just read that to you. That was socialism. Very similar. So when a person like Bernie Sanders, I'm a Democrat socialist, baloney, you're a socialist. You might even be close to communism. Right? Let's not kid ourselves. Look at what they're saying. What role does government have? You want government up here, or do you want government down here? I want government down here. What are the features of communism? A classless system. Oh, sure. There's going to be a class. The rich people there'll always be rich people. There's always going to be poor people, and there's going to be people in the middle class. Might be dwindling, but you have a middle class, like a bell curve, right? The rich, the poor, middle class. The means of production owned communally by the government, like communism in the Soviet Union. It wasn't communally, it was the government. Putin wasn't around at the time, he was a KGB guy. But Russia, the Soviet Union, controlled certain things. There was no profit motive. There was no incentive to make the product cheaper or better. You know, the expression, build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door. Well, if the government says that's the mousetrap, like it or lump it. That's it. You don't have a choice. You want a mousetrap, you got to buy that. If you want a pair of pants, you're going to buy what they sell you. I remember Ford said they can have any color they want as long as it's black. But he was a capitalist. And then eventually other colors came about. That's why you see the old movies or whatever, I know they're black and white, but you didn't see like a red gangster car. They were all black. And then eventually started to change. People wanted different colors. People wanted choices. Private property is non-existent. That's another feature. Non-existent. Doesn't exist. So if I want to live in a house, it's a government house. Right? And certainly businesses. You can't just say, I'm going to open up whatever. No, you're not. The state, you're not going to compete against the state. Like with Hitler, they had Volkswagen. That was the people's car. That was the car. If another company wanted to come in, you think Hitler's going to say, yeah, we could use the competition. No. That person would go missing. We'll get a stern warning, you're not going to compete against us. So when you hear the features, very similar to socialism, the opposite, 180 from communism. Let me give you an example of capitalism in a very simple way, like in the inception of it. Think about, and I think my producer will put up the cast of Gilligan's Island, but 6 guys, let's use 6 guys, make it easy, are stranded on a desert island. And there's no way of getting off initially. They're stuck. So the 6 of them get off the boat, swim ashore, the boat's sinking, they swim ashore, and they're laying there. You know, their clothes are torn, they're starving, they're thirsty, the sun is beating down on them, they don't have shelter, they don't know really what's over there, which could be animals that could attack them. They're afraid. Just like you watch the Castaway. When he gets there, he's frightened. He doesn't know what to expect. He's got no shoes. He's trying to find shoes or something for his feet. He's got a hurt tooth. He's in pretty bad shape. But then he learns to cope. So let's say those guys land on the island, and one of the guys is pretty resourceful. He's like, you know what? I'm going to find water. So he finds water. And he's like, I'm going to get fish, and I'm going to do this. And almost like the TV show Survivor, where the chubby guy was a good fisherman, and he stayed on the show longer than most others because he was going to get fish. So he had a value. If he lied around, they would have got rid of him. Oh, he's bringing us fish? We'll keep him. So one of the guys is going back and forth doing all these things, and the others are laying around doing nothing. So he says, wait a minute. I'm killing myself here. I'm going to get the water. It's like 2 miles away. I'm trying to build a shelter. I'm trying to set up an SOS on the beach. I'm trying to figure out what we got to do. Maybe I'm trying to build a raft to get the heck out of here. What's going on here? I'm done. I'm going to take care of myself. So another guy says, wait a minute. I'll help you out. So he says, you get the water and I'll build a shelter. But nothing else was getting done. Because by the time the guy came back, he was exhausted. The guy building the shelter didn't have time to go fishing. So the next guy says, you know what? I'm a fisherman. I'll fish. So he gets the fish, they get in the water, they get in the shelter, but they still don't have all the other jobs filled in. So little by little, you have a guy doing the water, a guy doing the fire, a guy getting the food, a guy handling security, a guy doing clothing, you know, making the hat or making whatever to protect the people from the sun beating down. Another guy is worried about extraction. All right, how can we get out of here? Let me see. All right, maybe he does the SOS, and then he's going to build a raft and maybe get to another island. So they each have a job to do, rather than just sitting around expecting to get food, or something of value that you need from someone else who's working while you're not. Now, if one of them was handicapped, like I said, a safety net. Okay, this guy was injured. We'll feed him. We'll take care of him. We'll nurse him back to health. We're not going to just let him die. But if that guy's healthy and he's just lazy, He's on his own. Take off. Go do what you have to do. So that's an example. And then it grows from there. You have a locksmith when houses are getting built, or he's going to build the lock, or you have somebody taking care of the horses, somebody who's a carpenter, and that's how the trades are developed. Now, the more valuable trades, those guys should make more money. Like an electrician might make more than a plumber, right? More schooling or more education, maybe a harder test, more skill, and that's how it should be, right? Like a brain surgeon shouldn't make as much as a guy who digs a ditch. No way. And maybe the brain surgeon doesn't make as much money as Bill Gates, because Bill Gates came up with an amazing concept. He was on the forefront. Usually the guys that are first through the wall are taking a big risk. You hear about them quitting college, and they go out and they create something in their garage, right? Or maybe a ball player could be. You know what? I'm not going to college. I'm not going to go. I graduate high school. I'm going to play minor league ball, and I'm going to try to make it to the major leagues. And maybe he does. And he should be rewarded because he had the skill and the determination and hard work to make it to the major leagues. You see it all the time. A lot of guys don't make it, With the expression is a broken bulb, for every broken heart on Broadway or something like that. Meaning a lot of people want to be on Broadway, or a lot of people go to Hollywood. I'm going to be a movie star. You go to Hollywood. You don't make it. Then what do? You got to find another job. Or a lot of waitresses in the city, they're all like actors and actresses out of work or looking for their next job. Right? But if they land the job and they have the talent, they should be rewarded. A guy who can play Major League Baseball and bat .300 should be rewarded because he has value to his team. Whereas somebody that has 2 left feet, he's never going to make it in that. But maybe Bill Gates was not an athlete, right? Michael Jordan was. Maybe Michael Jordan's not going to come up with the next computing platform or an idea that's going to make that kind of money. But he was one of the greatest basketball players ever to play the game. That's how he made his money. Endorsements and all that. That's capitalism. People want to buy sneakers that are tied to or connected to in some way Michael Jordan or LeBron James or something like that. Some guy came out who was just some average guy. You're going to say, oh, I'm going to buy sneakers that he's promoting. Who the heck is that guy? What I want to do now is go over a little bit of what they call frequently asked questions. These are questions that I get asked often. People come to me and they say, oh, I got a question for you. And they stop me in the hallway, or I get a phone call from somebody who has a dilemma and I answer the question. These are questions that I've thought about, that I get asked. So I figure if the people are asking me that, there are more people out there that want to have the answer to these kinds of questions. One is very common. What if I get a letter from CPS? CPS is Child Protective Services. They protect children. There's an agency that protects older people, but they protect children. So let's say you see your neighbor beat their child, or starve their child, or treat their child inappropriately. What can you do? You can call the police, which you can do, or you can call CPS. Either way, CPS is going to be notified. And now, if you're a teacher, if you're a cop, if you're an assistant DA, you're a mandated reporter. You have to pick up that phone, whether you want to or not. You're a mandated reporter. So if you're a teacher and you see a kid getting beaten and you don't do anything and they find out you knew about it, you're in trouble. So what happens? You get the letter. The first letter is going to say that you're being investigated. It's not an indicated letter or an unfounded letter yet. It says you're being investigated. Now, it could land you in family court, or they come to your house, they want to talk to the kids, they want to talk to you. If it's, let's say, educational neglect, they might want to say, let's get the report card. Let's see how many abscesses this kid has. Or if it's medical neglect, is he getting his shots? Or is he being taken to, maybe the kid hasn't been taken to the doctor in 2 years. Let's say somebody complained anonymously. Well, they'll never, whether it's anonymous or not, the person who gets that letter, unless the person who called tells them, they're never, ever going to know. They might surmise, but they're never going to be told. And that's so people don't, if I call and they find out it's me, he's going to give me hell. No, they won't tell them. They're not supposed to. So if someone says, I was told by, no. If they did, then the CPS work is wrong. So you get the letter, it says you're being investigated. Within 60 days, you're supposed to get another letter. And that letter will say, you were investigated, we must inform you now that it's indicated, or unfounded. If it's unfounded, it's like being found not guilty. You're done. It's over. You don't have to do anything. You might be ticked off that you had to go through that, but unfounded is what you want that letter to read. If it says indicated and you're the subject, because it could be, let's say parents are separated, the father gets a letter, or even if they're together, the father gets a letter because someone called out on the mom. It'll say, you're not the person being investigated, but we want you to know that the child, blah, blah, blah. Because you need to know. If my kid's being abused, I want to know about it. And I might not know because let's say I'm separated from the parent, the other parent. So 60 days you get indicated, unfounded. If it's indicated, then within 90 days, if you want to be expunged, in other words, not to be on the registry for abused and neglected kids, not a good thing. We're for 18 years, 10 years past the youngest child's 18th birthday. So in other words, when the kid is 28, so if you have a kid and they call CPS on you and it's indicated, and you do nothing, you'll be on that registry until that child is 28, until that person is 28. So if you want to work in a child care center, daycare center, teaching, you want to adopt, you better be careful and get an attorney who will be handling those cases. I handle them on a daily or on a regular, fairly, not every day, but on a regular basis. In fact, the other day I was in, we got it dismissed. You're allowed, so within 90, the attorney should put a packet together saying, my client didn't do this, or this was a misunderstanding, or didn't happen that way, or it was a mistake, my client, let's say it was hitting the child. My client really didn't hit the child that hard, didn't leave a mark. Here's letters from people saying he's a great dad or a great mom, and they can amend the report to unfounded. So that's why you send the packet in. If you just send a letter and saying, I want a hearing, they will give you that hearing. But you know, I think it was 10 in a row, my record. I knocked out those, they amended the report to unfounded. When you have to go down for the hearing, and almost all the time, I prevail. Now, sometimes you have to bide your time a little bit. You send your client, let's say it was alcohol, send him to a treatment facility. And then you come back and say, he no longer has that problem. Or a drug facility, or whatever the problem is. The one I had the other day, we had to wait a little while so the person put some distance between when the incident happened and court. And then the other side, it's like a prosecutor. They came around and they said, okay, we'll work out a deal, so you guys not going to be on that registry. Give you an example of where a person doesn't think it matters and it turns out to matter. We were lucky because we missed, the guy came to me after the 90 days. We were able to get him back in and prevailed. His thinking was, I'm a construction worker. I don't need to be off that registry. It doesn't matter to me. I don't have any kids. Maybe the kids are grown. I'm not going to adopt. I'm not going to work as a teacher and all that. Then he gets a job, a particular construction job at an elementary school. They're putting on a wing to the school, something like that. And they check the registry because they can't have these people near kids if they were a pedophile. This wasn't a pedophile, but a pedophile, or on that abuse and maltreatment registry, neglect. If you're on that registry, the school is going to say, we can't have that worker here. Sorry. So all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, I could lose my job. So he came to me. We were able to get him back in the game even though the 90 days passed. We explained the situation. We got him in there and we got him off that registry. And he was allowed to keep his job. Because generally, while you're going through the system, they don't divulge that you're on that registry to anybody. So if, let's say a school said, is he on the registry? Until the case is finalized, they would not report you. Okay? Now, sometimes when you get a letter, you only go to deal with CPS. Sometimes it's serious enough where you're not only dealing with CPS, which is separate from family court, but you're also dealing with family court. I'll give you an example. Let's say a parent drove drunk with a child in the back seat, Lee Andrews law. Not only will CPS get involved, but there's a reasonable chance that family court will get involved, or criminal court could get involved. Now, if it's just child support, if it's just CPS, you got a fighting shot. If the case also goes to family court, you got to win that case, or get an ACOD, German in contemplation of dismissal, wait for the ACOD to run, and then move to get off, or move within the 90 days, but then let the case drag on, say another 3 months, another 2 months, another 1 month, then they're off. The ACOD runs its course. Because an ACOD is still technically a pending case. So the CPS judge can say, wait a minute, if he screws up there, this case is coming back. I'm not sticking my neck out. Wait till it ends. The CPS agency would say, wait till the ACOD in family court runs its course. So very, very important. So you could have a fight on two fronts, where you're in family court, you're in criminal court, you're in your CPS. And that hearing is not like a family court hearing. The rules of evidence really don't apply. Right? Hearsay evidence can come out. So you'd even have to have the person, let's say they came to the house to check on the person who had CPS called on them. Their report is allowed in. Now in family court, there's rules of evidence. So the report might not come in, you might need the CPS worker to testify. And I would like that, because then I can cross-examine the CPS worker. And for the benefit of my client, I could say, well, maybe you didn't do a thorough job, or your notes aren't done properly, or did you realize this or that? I remember one time I had a case where my client's 3 kids were taken from her, and we had a hearing that went to like 9:30 at night, because when they take your kids, 5 o'clock doesn't come and you go home. You have that hearing, because if you lose, they keep your client's kids for a period of time. And we had a hearing, and I got to cross-examine a CPS worker, and I was able to create enough, it's not so much reasonable doubt, but create in the mind of the judge a situation where they felt that these kids were not taken from my client properly. And I got them returned that night. I ended up leaving the courthouse like 10 o'clock. But I was able to cross-examine the caseworker, or if he's a cop, or if anybody, a neighbor testifying, you get to cross-examine. Criminal case, you get to cross-examine. Family court, same thing. Civil, not in a CPS hearing, because how do you cross-examine notes? You can mount a defense. You can say, well, that's not right, and I have a witness that says that's wrong. But the rules of evidence are different. So very, very important. The bottom line is this: whenever you have a legal matter, it is very, very important to hire an attorney that's well-versed in that area of the law. I always say matrimonial, criminal, family court, those are things I handle. You wouldn't come to me for a bankruptcy matter, right? Just like you wouldn't go to a brain surgeon if you had something wrong with your foot, no matter how good that doctor is. Before we leave, I wrote a book called Divorce: A Practical Guide, chock full of information. You take a look at it, it answers a lot of your questions. And it also covers a little bit of criminal, family court, divorce, not just New York. It covers equitable distribution here in New York, community property in the western states. I want to thank you for watching the show. I hope you learned a little something. You can go to my website, jusinolaw.com, if you have any suggestions for future shows. I used to do a lot more law. Now I'm doing a little more, I call it politics, law, social commentary with an edge. Thanks for watching. You have a great day.